Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this Legal 500 webinar titled Reflect and Look Ahead, Technology in the Legal Space in 2022, where we're joined by our distinguished panelists, experts in the legal field and in technology. We are going to be talking about technological innovations in the legal space. So as we're aware, each new year brings with it an opportunity for re-evaluation and reflection on current trends, as well as an attempt to predict what the new year might bring. 2021 was an eventful time, with the world still very much dealing with the effects of the ongoing pandemic. And as with most industries, legal professionals have had to adapt their work style in response to global events. In certain ways, legal professionals seem to have benefited from the advent of digital technologies that have made it easier than ever to automate workflows and are able to reach and focus on more clients, as well as emerging AI technologies that allow for legal practitioners to focus less on repetitive and mundane tasks. Now they're able to prioritize tasks where their expertise is best utilized. As with any new technology, opportunities for criminal activities appear as well as a result that bring with them their own unique sets of challenges in the form of protecting vital business data. As we'll see in our discussion, it is important for legal professionals to be aware of trends in the new year, not just for the opportunities or potential risks that are available today in a dry cost-benefit analysis, but the real value in discussing these developments can be found in the transformation, the very transformation of the way the legal sector operates for years to come. More than just efficiency and speed, technology is bound to open up new pathways of practicing law that practitioners who do not pay attention risk being left behind. I am joined today by a number of panelists, including Doug Luffman, who is VP and Deputy General Counsel of Product and Innovation at Docusigns. Mr. Luffman's areas of focus include strategic intellectual property counseling, patent portfolio development, intellectual property enforcement and licensing strategy, IP asset acquisitions, standards development strategy, IP and technology licensing. And we're very pleased to be welcoming him with us today. Hello, Doug.
Good morning.
We're also joined in by Dr. Michael Reha, who is General Counsel and Head of Group Legal and Compliance at Eurofins Scientific Group, where he is responsible for providing round-the-clock in-house advice, mainly on commercial and corporate law, a broad spectrum of compliance topics, as well as specific aspects of M&A transactions. Having gained extensive experience in M&A in prior in-house positions, Michael has set out to further build and develop the group's legal and compliance function in a decentralized, fast-growing international network of laboratories with presence in more than 45 countries. Michael, good afternoon to you as well. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me.
We're also joined by Christian Rigo, who is responsible for the legal affairs at Braskem Netherlands, as well as of Braskem Europe. Initially joining the Brazilian arm of Braskem in 2013, Christian joined in the capacity of Legal Affairs Manager, Consulting and Litigation, with a focus on civil law, commercial, and environmental law, as well as encouraging greater integration between legal developments around the world to support business more efficiently in Europe. Christian has supported the internalization of Braskem and for global initiatives such as a specialized compliance program and the global contract system. Good afternoon to you, Christian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Good afternoon.
We also have technology legal expert today, Julian Kayet, Director of Technology and Innovation at Loyens & Loeff. Before joining Loyens & Loeff, he held various corporate roles at Arcadis, a Dutch engineering company, including as Chief Digital Officer, where he designed and launched several programs to increase process automation and incubate legal solutions for clients. At Loyens & Loeff, he aims to both create and harness the opportunities the digital revolution brings and provide better, cheaper, and faster solutions to clients. Good afternoon to you too, Julian. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, Johan de Broeke is also joining us from Belgium, and he has served as Group General Counsel for multinational insurance company Ageas since October 2016. He comes from a financial services background, having worked as a banking and finance partner for Altius for 18 years. Good afternoon, Johan.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Now, there's a wide variety of expertise on our panel today, and we're thrilled to have you all on board. And we think it might be great if we can start by sharing a presentation that we have prepared, which Doug might be able to help me with.
Sure, my pleasure, Chris. So today, what we were hoping to do, and again, we're really excited to have such a great co-panelists here as well, is first I thought I'd start with a little of the teeing up of background regarding what we're going to be talking about today, as well as what I think many of us face kind of in our profession. And then from there, we're thinking of going into kind of interactive discussion, and definitely we would encourage questions wherever anyone would like. So with that, starting off with, every company really has a system of agreement, whether they know it or not. And if you can go to the next slide, when one asks, what is a system of agreement? It really is broken down into 4 components: prepare, sign, act, and manage. And the first part is obviously preparing the agreement. That's everything from either using a template to actually drafting something from scratch, to obviously putting it together and starting to negotiate it, to finally finalizing the agreement, and then shifting into the second segment, which is signing, which is the traditional sense of either by physically signing with ink, as well as electronic mechanism as well. And then obviously communicating that signature or that is sent on the final agreement to the other parties. Then obviously acting on that agreement in some manner, and then ultimately managing all the obligations and being able to retrieve those agreements at a later date. And so when we talk about the system of agreement, what we have found is that these are really the 4 primary pieces. And what we struggle with every day is that a lot of this to date has been very manual. If we go to the next slide real quick. And because of that, it's not just built for the speed of today's business, is really just what we're finding with regard to the system agreement. So this is one of the reasons why we're starting to really focus more and more on modernizing the system. And we believe that it's enormously critical. And if we go to the next slide. And for that reason, what we have done over the last 20 years of our existence is starting to really build out what we call the Docusign Agreement Cloud. And what this is really following the same type of pattern, preparing, signing, acting, and managing agreements, building in a digital workflow underlying technology in order to allow to attach and to push people through all the various different segments of the agreement cloud, integrate with other systems, and obviously provide additional intelligence with regard to this agreement cloud. You can go to the next slide. So agreements can be legally signed all over the world. We know that. And because of that, if we can go to the next slide, what we thought would be a good starting point is really looking at legal trends and priorities. And what we've done over a number of years is always kept our finger on the type of professionals who are out there and really what the top priorities are for those individuals. So I thought this was actually a couple of interesting data points that we just published late last year after surveying. Basically, we have over 1 million customers, 1 billion users of our system, is really reaching out to the overall legal ecosystem and just saying, hey, look, what keeps you up at night and what is keeping you busy? And so what came back is over half of the respondents really have stressed, I think the first data point is not one that is a surprise, which is compliance risk. It's always something as a lawyer we are always keeping an eye on and always kind of trying to make sure that we mitigate it as much as we can. Second, which I thought was an interesting one, was actually improving collaboration, especially in this kind of remote environment that we're in today. We're seeing that this focus is increasing all the time, because I think there's a recognition that in the past, collaboration was not as effective, and that collaboration is now something that, as part of the digital transformation we're all in, is really something that we all desire to do. And then lastly, reducing errors, recognizing that based on starting to digitize things, there really is this need to try to reduce errors, everything from whether you put in the wrong amount for something or you don't have consistent terms in your agreements and the like, and really trying to find ways to create more consistency in the way you do business every day, and especially with regard to your agreements. Go to the next slide. So for that reason, it's not a surprise that legal contracting resources continue to be in high demand. I thought it was interesting, kind of some of the stats that we came away with were, 2/3 of the incoming legal requests are for contract work, which is understandable because a lot of what we do every day is making sure that we formalize business relationships. What I thought was actually very telling were really the stats around the volume of agreements. And it ranges from, as little as, 100 agreements a month to almost to nearly 1,000. And so that's about 75% of our respondents actually say that that is really their sweet spot. And so there's a very large volume of agreements, everything from an NDA to a master service agreement or master purchase agreement to other types of agreements as well. So with that, if we go to the next slide. However, there are also some clear barriers to actually trying to digitize processes. I mean, one of the top ones that we have heard time and time again, and one that I've obviously had to power through as well, is really the difficulty of identifying workflows to digitize. The way I characterize this is really being able to better understand your own processes and the process of your company, and then trying to then adapt those processes to a repeatable process that then you can actually automate and digitize. The next one that I thought was interesting was the regulations for manual processes. And so in many respects, there are sometimes compliance risks. There are sometimes requirements that actually suggest that you have to do it more manual. And so that's one of the things as part of my function, we have a government affairs function that actually leans in and works with governments around the world to really try to reduce the amount of headwinds on trying to digitize different types of processes and trying to get everything to be much more automated through basically having electronic signing, agreements that are able to be submitted as digital agreements and the like. And then I thought some of these other ones were interesting from a logistics standpoint. Oh, if we can go back real quick. From a logistics standpoint, is the difficulty of getting buy-in, the cost and the return on investment, and better understanding how by digitizing it improves the ecosystem. And then some of the other things such as change management and the like. Okay, we go to the next slide. And then lastly, with regard to kind of legal increasingly is looking to technology as a solution to a lot of these different type of headwinds that they face. And I thought it was very encouraging to see that 72% of those that were surveyed are frequently looking for new solutions and tools to adopt. And I think we are really in a renaissance as it relates to legal tech technologies, with regard to really there being a lot of new workflow technologies out there, a lot more of willingness to adopt these by basically our compatriots that are basically engaging in negotiations, as well as our internal stakeholders are willing to do it as well as the self-service desire that many are looking for more access to information, and legal being viewed as a knowledge management type of resource to really provide additional insight as to what we do every day. And then 82% are always or often looking for influencers as it relates to the decisions, which I think is also very encouraging, because often there's a stereotype of lawyers being technology averse. And I think there's a recognition now that lawyers are becoming more and more technologists as to adopting technologies and really looking forward to be much more efficient business partners, as well as kind of change management type of agents within a company. So with that, I was thinking, Chris, maybe turning it back over to you, and then I'd be really curious about what others think about maybe some of the questions that we have kind of teed up for the discussion today. And again, encourage those that have questions to please chime in as well as to other things that you'd like us to touch on. So thank you, Chris, for the time to kind of walk through the backdrop, and look forward to the interactive discussion.
Thank you so much, Doug, for that presentation. It's always great seeing points made with data that help drive the point forward. At this point, I'd just like to echo what you just said to encourage the audience to come forward with any questions. We have a unique selection of panelists here. And we also will be more than happy to circulate the slides that we have just seen that Doug was kind enough to present for us. And with that, Doug, I think it might be a good point to just come back to you for a moment and really talk about a little bit about, so we spoke a little bit about current trends. And one of the things that I was wondering about was the future of e-signatures in legal departments in the wider industry. I was wondering if you could start us off by talking a little bit about that, the future of e-signatures.
Yeah, sure. A great question. Obviously, we've been doing electronic signing for over 20 years and helped draft a lot of legislation out there. What I've been actually at Docusign probably for about 2, and the reason I joined was not because of actually our kind of innovative way of doing electronic signing, but I think part of kind of the messaging you just heard around Docusign looking at Agreement Cloud as really the next iteration of this. And what I mean by that is it's not just about the signing ceremony, which allows for documents to be more digital, because otherwise you would have to print it out, then sign in ink, and then scan it back in, and you'd lose a lot of the metadata and just the information. But rather recognizing that electronic signature was the precursor to this larger trend of an end-to-end workflow, end-to-end digital transformation and digital journey that includes turning agreements into basically business assets that are not just something that you actually sign, put into a digital drawer or a physical drawer and call it a day, but rather actually pulling strategic information out of it, obligations out of it, and being able to actually look at it as almost like a live a document that is part of doing business every day. So very excited about where things are going. And we're seeing that e-signature generally is being adopted more and more across the world. What we're finding is that basically governments are truly looking at it as kind of the starting point of the digital journey. And then from there, really expanding to other use cases as well.
Thank you, Doug. It's really exciting to see such a tool that has been used for such a long time, utilized in unique ways and new opportunities that we were not expecting. And I would love to get the perspective of people in the industry. We're joined by a number of in-house counsel, and we also have in-house counsel on that panel. So I was wondering if we could get an in-house perspective on e-signatures as well. Johan, I was wondering if I could turn to you to ask, what are some trends that you notice in e-signatures in your own practice, and whether or not they are as valid as wet signatures, and if not, why not? And what other issues you might be willing to talk about?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Great question, Chris. We have seen a huge change before and after COVID, and that's not a surprise. Before COVID, we had also the possibility, of course, as Doug rightly mentioned, it exists for decades, the e-signature. But as of COVID, of course, it was very clear that it became mainstream. Everybody had to use it and was willing to use it, while at the beginning there was always a little bit of hesitant. We have seen also a big difference between our Asian subsidiaries and the European subsidiaries. The reason being that the Asians traditionally are a little bit more techie savvy, and they have less problems with doing things over the internet. In our field, which is the insurance field, for instance, you have clients who just sign up for an insurance contract and have a claim and file it on the internet and then get the money at the end, and everything is done by the internet. So they are used to it, and that's quite normal. So in that respect, there's quite some difference, but still, I must say that Europe is catching up in that respect, and most of our countries in Europe are doing very well. With respect to the question whether or not it's valid, as at least under European law, we consider it completely valid, as valid, if not even better than a wet signature, which is a little bit more fraud dangerous than e-signature. So in that respect, we feel very comfortable about the e-signatures, and we want to develop it more. However, we have also seen practical issues with that, of course, especially if you're looking a little bit higher up in the management. Our top management is quite often complaining about the fact that they get requests from e-signatures. They don't know where it comes from. They don't know who has approved the agreement. And then suddenly they have an agreement on the screen and they have to sign it. And it's a valid signature they are going to put on there. In the old days, of course, you went with a signature to signataire to the CEO, gave a couple of words of explanation. He felt much more comfortably. He saw the general counsel or somebody from the legal department. So that's a change. We have also seen that they are a little bit more concerned about it. They are not against it, certainly not, but they are a little bit more worried about it. That is this really something I'm allowed to sign because I don't see a physical person? And of course, there are all kinds of techniques to solve that issue, but in practice, we are sometimes a little bit old-fashioned.
Very interesting to hear. It seems like we have a number of questions from the audience as well regarding this. Johan, just a quick follow-up from an attendee. Do you consider it to be based, so from your answer, I gather that it is just as secure, if not more. And do you find that there's a difference based on jurisdiction?
Within the EU, we are basically the same. I mean, within the EU, you have European regulations, and in that respect is the same. In other jurisdictions, they can be different, yes. So you have to look at it from a general counsel perspective to all jurisdictions which are different. Most of the countries, they accept it in one way or another. But maybe it's also worth to mention that in some jurisdictions and in some professions, even there are some different habits. For instance, notaries, at least in Belgium and most European countries, notaries, they don't accept e-signatures, but this is one of the very few exceptions. So you have still to go physically to a notary and have it notarized. And I also noticed that some old-fashioned industries, such as banks, and maybe that's surprising, they also sometimes don't accept e-signatures. They really want to have the wet signature. And I think the reason for that is because their compliance system is a little bit out of date, most probably, and most probably they have a checklist, and somewhere there is a document with a signature on that. That checklist has not been changed yet, and therefore they exist to require an e-signature. But normally, I think with 95, if not more % of the cases, that should be not an issue at all.
I see. Yeah, so it seems for the majority that's totally valid. Christiane, I was also wondering if I could bring in the discussion and get your perspective on e-signatures in your own practice. Do you have any thoughts that you wanted to share with us on automated processes for legal documents as well?
Yes, Chris. I can mention that considering the position of the global company, we also start to use electronic signatures several years ago. So it's not it started during the pandemic. So some years ago we already have that. But it was only 3 years ago that we really increased the automatization for legal documents in our company. So it happened when we implemented a contract system integrated with the electronic signatures. So from that moment, we could see how the legal department could contribute with the efficiency for the signature flow. Yeah, so in the past, we had a lot of paper or specific flows and additional costs, yeah, as Doug already mentioned here. And after that, when we implement that, especially combine the contract system integrated with electronic signature, we could see how it's important for the signature flow and how it could not only save time for people that should sign the document, but also from legal perspective, it's very important because we could guarantee the storage of all documents signed electronically. That's from legal perspective, it's very, very important. Yeah.
Absolutely. At this point, I just want to say thank you to all attendees for questions and to reassure you that we'll try to get to as many as we can. We just have a couple more points to go through current trends before we go into possible predictions for 2022, and we will have time, hopefully by the end, to get to every single one. So moving on ahead, Michael, I was wondering if you could talk about some of the practical issues and implications of the current use of e-signatures that you have encountered in your own practice, and are there any aspects to which you would like to bring more attention or highlight for our listeners?
Thanks, Chris. Very interesting question. And I would like to kind of bring a bit of a broader perspective into the whole picture, going away from just looking at electronic signatures and drawing it a bit bigger to kind of electronic support of business processes and how the legal implications on that one are. And here's one interesting thing that I would like to kind of share as an approach that is probably a bit outside of the mainstream that we see these days, but that is an approach that we're taking within Eurofins, and which is kind of just food for thought for everybody. So what we're doing in Eurofins, we're kind of a company that we're operating testing facilities. So laboratories doing all sort of testing, COVID testing, food testing, feed testing, forensic testing, a very, very global business, which however is highly decentralized and with a very complex regulatory environment in each of the entities that we, in each of the laboratories that we're operating. And for structural and other compliance reasons, we've also set up a very complex legal structure around that. So to give you an idea, on a worldwide basis, we're running around 1,100 legal entities. So this has a fair bit of complexity in all sorts of ways. And what we did already decades ago on the operation system side was to kind of look out for operations laboratory systems that would support us running this system. And kind of we found nothing in the market. And when we were growing big enough and scale allowed us to do so, we started developing in-house solutions that were kind of supporting those processes specifically built to the needs. And recently, like 5 years ago, we started extending this idea into the management of our master data for all our legal entities, for all our business subjects, for all our real estate sites and so forth. And we're also looking for systems on the market. We tried something that we acquired 5 years ago, and it turned out to be not a good solution because it was not kind of reflecting all the complexities that we were facing in our organization. And so what we did 2 years ago, we started reaching out on a project where we would set up an in-house solution that would be capturing all these master data objects that we're having on the legal entity side, on the business subject side, on the real estate side, and build an in-house system of a repository and a workflow, and with kind of a document repository attached to that one, developing that in-house that would allow us to kind of support our business in an efficient way and yet taking care of all those organizational security concerns that we were having, because next to the very big regulatory complexity and structural complexity, we kind of grew very sensitive to IT security threats after we fall victim to a massive cybersecurity attack in 2019, where our IT security teams kind of grew very particular on certain security aspects. And so also kind of, in essence, we found nothing that would support all of these very diametric wishes that we were having and requirements, started developing something in-house, which is a very interesting journey. So it's kind of, I think it's not easy. It's a long shot. You have to invest a lot of work, but if you have the particular settings that support such a feature, like you have to be big enough, you have to have the scale, you have to have some experience in developing stuff, that can also be an interesting solution. And kind of to conclude that, this tool is currently being developed in a way that it would be open to interface with electronic signature optionalities as well, so that we kind of can run our future environment based on this own developed portal, which would then plug in various functionalities to allow us e-signatures and other functionalities. And I hope that in 1 or 2 years from now, I will be able to give you an update that this was not only a nice sounding idea, but actually a success story.
We all hope so, Michael, indeed. And how would you say that your current platform has the potential to compare against other technologies or other platforms for handling e-signatures, beyond the data that you just mentioned? Like the big data always helps with a number of unexpected ways. Do you expect that to have material impact?
Well, I mean, as I said, it's a bit hard to compare because we're a company which is peculiar in a couple of positive ways, but we are in certain ways different than others, and therefore we feel that this is a good way. Of course, we want to kind of achieve the same that others want to achieve with bringing in off-the-shelf technology. And off-the-shelf technology has a definite advantage, like it's usually sort of plug and play, and you kind of get the benefits way quicker. It has the disadvantage that it doesn't necessarily fit onto every strain structure that you need to have for other reasons. And that's what we're doing. And that's why we went for the in-house developing solution. I don't feel that this is kind of the success story that can be easily applied by everybody else, but I kind of wanted to give a perspective that also outside of off-the-shelf products, there are ways to bring in technology. And if you have the substance and the patience to do so, I hope that we can also succeed on that route.
Absolutely, sounds very promising. Now, Julian, we've heard from Michael an interesting new perspective. I was wondering, how are you working with e-signatures at Lorenz & Loeff?
Yeah, a bit like Johan, I think the COVID situation has been a big booster for us when it comes to e-signature. So we decided to deploy the technology systematically within the firm. It's still a bit of a fresh story with just under a year of experience in terms of deploying the technology massively in the firm. I would say so far we have internal use cases, external use cases, so like employment contracts, letter of engagements, sometimes client documents, vendors, of course, the likes of Docusign. I'm sure we sign with them with an electronic signature. And what we see is that we have a varied level of adoption depending on the jurisdiction, the use case, the practice groups, and I'm not sure I can see a pattern yet on why some are picking up the technology real quick and others a bit more slowly. But what we saw at the beginning, you had like a number of misconceptions about the technology. I think one of the colleagues mentioned it. There was like a bit of a bias towards wet signature. So you had to do double down on explanations to convince the colleagues that it was as good, if not better, than wet signature in most situations. And you had also misconceptions in terms of how difficult it would be in practical terms to use the Docusign technology. I think even before getting any explanation, any demo, people say, "Well, it's not something I think I can do." And of course, when they see how easy it is to set things up and then get things done, when you get past those initial resistance, you get quick adoption. One thing I'd like to mention as well, there was the expectation things would be stored in the document management system of the firm as well at the beginning. We use iManage. And then they realized that you could store your signed document in the cloud of Docusign that was equally good and not such a challenge actually. So we had to get past this first initial objections to speed up the adoption. But what we see is a very promising rate of adoption the last few months.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Julian. Just to what Julian was saying, Doug, is Docusign having some program or demo to overcome that initial barrier that Julian just mentioned? Do you have something in the works that might encourage the adoption?
With regard to, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, with regard to adoption of e-signatures, I believe Julian was just saying that there's sometimes a slight barrier to entry, and I was wondering if Docusign have some demo or something that.
Oh, sorry, you threw me with the demo part. Yeah, so what we try to do is, and again, I've been trying to answer a lot of the questions online, so thank you for those questions coming in. It's a couple-fold. So one is we have an e-signature legality guide that at least provides the initial guidance as it relates to kind of e-signature. There are then the dynamics of basically governments having the laws, but not necessarily adopting them. And it's a bit of change management education. That's one of the reasons why, as part of my remit, is not only do I support the product group, transactional and the like, but we also have a very active government affairs program. And so what I would definitely encourage is in those regions where those are seeing basically difficulties in the adoption, we are all ears. We would love to hear where we can help kind of lean in. One example recently is in the UK, it was flagged that real estate transactions were not heavily able to be used with electronic signature or specifically electronic witnessing. We then engaged with the HMLR that was actually very receptive, and we helped draft the regulations associated with it. We even helped tweak our product in order to align with the regulations. And then we also engage in the legal community in order to really engage in explaining the nuances, as well as to kind of help get the word out as to the evolution. And we've done the same thing in various different regions around the world. And one of the reasons why I joined Docusign is because I would look at our company as one of our differentiators, not just being our technology and our products, but also how we engage in the legal community and really involve basically the legal community as part of the solution. So the more eyes and ears we get into where there might be major headwinds, we're happy to kind of prioritize it and lead it as well.
Absolutely, sounds great. Thanks very much, Doug. And thank you, Julian, for mentioning that as well. Also, Doug, thank you for answering all these questions. That's very, very helpful. And just to say to our listeners that we will be getting to them, where we will open them up to the panel. But Doug has been kind enough to also provide a few specific answers as well. So looking ahead, moving on to the looking ahead section of the webinar, Doug, you already touched on this in the presentation already, but I was just wondering if you could highlight again, very briefly, some of the main trends in the technological space that you foresee or that you would like to draw attention to?
Yeah, I think the primary trends that we're seeing, and actually there was someone mentioned earlier about remote online notary, or just notarization is probably one example, is a trend. What we're seeing is areas that have not been regularly adopted for digital transformation have actually been revisited. We're seeing that with electronic wills. We're seeing that with even notarization, for example, in the United States. I think it's over, I want to say it's over 30, if not 40 states now have actually adopted what we call a remote online notary. And what that basically is a regulated electronic witnessing process that allows for audio-visual as well. We're also seeing this in Australia, where they're lightening a lot of the electronic witnessing laws in order to allow for more of a collaborative function. So the exciting thing is that the agreement cloud is really coming to fruition. Some of it is because of the pandemic, where the recognition is that by testing out these new technologies, people are realizing that actually it is better and it actually is more efficient. And so the other trend that we've been seeing is often that resistance to digital transformation is always suggesting that the physical world is actually better. For example, we'll just use witnessing as an example of suggesting that by being physically in the same place as the signers, that actually helps reduce fraud and the like. In our analysis and us engaging with legal professionals around the world, we're actually finding the exact opposite, which is by having online a type of engagements, you're increasing the digital audit trails that you have. You're increasing the workflows and the actual end-to-end process that's actually worked on. So you actually know all the steps that somebody takes in order to get from generating an agreement to signing the agreement to basically managing the agreement and the like. And so I think those are some of the trends we're seeing, is that there's a loosening of a lot of the regulations and the resistance to allowing for documents to be entirely digital, to working with documents digitally, and the like.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Johan mentioned this before as well, that the advent of these new technologies do reduce these sort of risks at some point, which is great. And we also had a question on e-witnessing, indeed, which you were kind enough to answer, and I believe you just did as well. So moving forward, Julian, if I could come back to you and just ask you, in your own practice as our technology expert, what was your biggest challenge in 2021 regarding automation technology, and how do you expect those trends to continue into 2022?
Well, I have a long list of challenges, Chris, but let me pick a few. I think we see a lot of potential in AI and machine learning in the profession in general, and it's hard work to get it operational. So last year was a year of learning, getting down the learning curve, and we expect to continue in the next few years. We are not dropping the ball because the potential is enormous, namely for bulk document review and that sort of use case. But I would never diminish or underestimate the challenges of getting it to work every time we need to. So that's one. A second one I wanted to mention is we are carefully exploring the world of low code, no code. We are a law firm, so we don't want to go in, plain, application development that's too far from home. And at the same time, the standard software solutions available in the market are not exactly what we want, or not exactly always as flexible as we would like them to do to create a bit of a branded experience for clients. It's a bit what Michael was saying before. Sometimes you want something a bit bespoke to create a unique experience for your clients, internal users or clients. So we are carefully exploring low code, no code to see whether that could be a nice middle ground between off-the-shelf solution and hardcore application development. Again, lots of lessons learned, but a lot of potential, but clearly not a walk in the park. And the third one I'd like to mention, it's probably like kicking an open door, but the Apache vulnerability at the end of last year was a healthy reminder that we should never lower the guard when it comes to cybersecurity. It turned out that we were fine and we got through without any damage or any potential liability for clients whatsoever. But a healthy reminder that we live in a dangerous world and we can expect more of those challenges in the coming period. The more of them, more frequent, and we need to keep on raising the level to make sure we can deliver sufficient cybersecurity internally and towards clients. So that's those are the challenges of 2021, to just name three.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't know if I could follow up with another one, Julian. In my own experience from speaking to the different practitioners in the industry, one of the things that comes up with more often than not is that new technologies allow them to reach more clients, and also not just that, but also to find more specialized clients and to match their own specific expertise. And I assume that ties in, and please correct me if not, and I welcome the rest of the panel to jump in if I'm wildly wrong, but I also assume that ties in with what you briefly mentioned about AI. Is that something that will reach to clients? Is that something that you're working on as well?
Currently, AI is used more as a back office productivity technology. So, of course, we mention it to clients. It's, for example, part of the due diligence is done using algorithm. But I would say it is supporting delivery of our services to clients. Clients don't see the AI technology directly. Whether AI will be client-facing technology, I think we're not there yet. I think first I'd like this to be a great productivity technology internally to basically deliver better, faster, cheaper services to clients. And of course, I mean, there will be client-facing applications. They are already in some law firms, but I would say they are still immature and it's not the top priority for us now.
Hey, Chris, one additional point, and Joan, great comments there. The way that we view it at Docusign is that we see that the evolution has gone from electronic signing to Agreement Cloud to then the Smart Agreement Cloud. And we view that the Smart Agreement Cloud is where AI comes in, that I don't think you can actually have a product which is AI. I mean, we just bought a company over a year ago, Seal Software, that was an AI analytics company. And the vision we've had that we've stated publicly is that we view it as potentially becoming the back-end recommendation engine and intelligence engine that's going to actually then help facilitate additional types of things, improving your workflows, improving the way you interpret the agreements, finding additional provisions that may be of issue, reacting to changes in regulations and the like. So I do think that there's a trend, and I agree with June that probably today it is not as visible, even though it's very trendy to talk about AI and ML. But I do think that there is a trend afoot, which is looking at AI as a complementary feature that actually then helps attorneys better negotiate agreements, better sign agreements, better manage the agreements after it is signed and the like.
Yeah, I could not agree more, Doug. I think what's visible to clients is more the workflow automation. That is really highly visible to clients, and then that's a key priority for this year. But AI is more in the background, and a very important component, but in the background, not visible to clients, and they don't need to see it; they just need to see the outcome.
Of course, yeah, that makes total sense. Absolutely, thank you both. I was wondering if we could move on to the role of general counsel in the adoption of technologies, because at the Legal 500, we're very strong believers in the strong role of the GCs, in that a lot of the time GCs can wield, through the positions within the companies, they can also promote new trends very efficiently, perhaps quite efficiently. And Michael, I was wondering if I could ask you, how do you see the role of general counsel in adopting new technologies in the year to come?
Well, thanks, Chris. I think what I see is kind of a twofold role. So on the one hand, as a general counsel, you're part of the business and you kind of have a co-responsibility for helping and fostering the competitiveness of your business. And part of what you're doing and part of what every legal operation is doing, whether we want it or not, we create some friction. The things that we're doing are kind of usually because you have to comply with this and you have to take into account that. So it's all kind of creating friction. And our ultimate goal, if you want to be fostering your business, is kind of reduce that friction to the extent possible, taking into account all the things that need to be considered. And so here, in line with the general also risk appetite of your business, you have to help your business to kind of identify tools that will allow you to bring down that friction and to reduce that friction. And electronic signatures and the subsequent processes that were mentioned before here and discussed in this call are a classic example where you kind of bring down the friction of having to print, sign, scan, lose on the way, ship it around into a very simple environment, which is doing the same thing that you want to achieve, kind of expressing your will in a binding manner on a document in a way simpler and cheaper and less frictious way. So that's kind of the enabler part. What I find equally important is kind of the role of general counsel and the legal team in general as a challenger of things. So sort of a constructive interpretation of the classic image of the in-house counsel of being the naysayer. So we don't want to say no out of principle, but we are the ones who kind of point out that while this new idea and this new tool may look super fancy, but still, guys, you have to take into account IT security here. You have to take care that this is GDPR compliant. You may have this regulatory provision there. You may have that contractual obligation there. And so the role of legal there is to kind of open the eyes of everybody participating in that process, that there are more dimensions than the pure efficiency and the pure profit maximizing stuff. And we need to bring those things on the table so that we allow the businesses to make the best possible decisions with respecting all of the relevant facts and not kind of omitting any of the dimensions that may also be relevant. Because if you kind of make a decision falling short on one of the two of the relevant dimensions, this is going to bite you back quite soon and usually quite badly. So I think here kind of twofold role of enabler, sponsor of things on the one hand, but also we have to be the guys that are critically raising questions, asking questions, and giving a reality check to the ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, listening to you, communication and a critical spirit, inquisitive spirit is quite important in navigating what's coming over the next year, which is very, very interesting. Thank you very much for that, Michael. Johan, what advice would you give to GCs in your sector today? This touches on what Michael just said as well, but I was wondering, this sort of a broader, your own experience, if you would like to expand on that.
Yes, of course, I don't have a crystal ball, and we know that there will be a lot of changes, but there's one change that's coming up that I think the general counsels in general should spend more time on, and that's artificial intelligence. Not for the reasons which are just explained by Doug and by Julian, in the sense that it's not artificial intelligence that will organize the way we are working as general counsel or as legal persons. It will not negotiate documents, it will not draft documents, or at least that's for a long time. But it's artificial intelligence is used a lot in companies, in the business of the companies, mainly in companies that have a lot of data, and that will be a challenge for the future. And the reason why I'm saying that is mainly because the European institutions, they are looking at it very closely. There's draft legislation that's circulating now, which is really addressing that issue of artificial intelligence. And just to give you an idea of how important it is, the fines which are in the draft regulations now is 6% of the worldwide turnover. So if you have a large company and the maximum fine is 6% of the worldwide turnover, that's a huge amount of money. We're talking about, just to give you an idea, GDPR, we all know about, all complaining about GDPR, it's only 4%. So artificial intelligence is 6%. So it gives an idea of how important it could be. And it's certainly not for 2022, of course, but it will start now, and you better look at it now, I would say, and especially the business, your businesses from the general counsels, they should start taking that into account because it will become the next big issue.
I see. Thank you very much, Johan. And just one final question regarding the role of general counsel. Christian, in your own experience, do you see technology impacting efficiency today positively?
Oh, yes. First of all, I fully agree with Johan and also Michael that for the legal department, we have a lot of challenges ahead. And talk about efficiency, I think that the legal department is also responsible for achieving results. Yeah? For sure, it's mandatory for all departments in the company. So for legal department, it's not different. Yeah, and I think that for the general counsels, we have to strive for maximal efficiency in all document flows. So if we're able to combine technology with operational activities and strategic activities in the legal department, we should do it. Yeah, because if you can transform and if you can change the legal department in a more digital way, at the end of the day, it will be a result for the company, yeah, not only for the legal department. So I think that we can also operate to preserve our efficiency and agility if we invest in electronic signature and the correct management process and technological tools in general. Yeah, so when we centralize it here, yeah, all electronic documents, electronic signatures, and we organize our repository and control, we could guarantee more efficiency for the results of the company, because now we have organization, we have controls, and we can manage it better, the rights and the obligations assumed by the company. So what we are doing by implementing the technology in the legal department, at the end of the day, for me, is preserving and defending the rights and duties of the company in a much more efficient way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So essentially, it's a facilitator for the role of GCs, as already described. It just seems to be able to provide many more tools, GCs, to be more efficient and more present in that role within the company. We also have been getting a number of questions, which our panelists have been very efficient in answering already, but I think it's useful to go over some of them. And we have a few questions specific on Docusign, and specifically over whether Docusign could provide some guidance on the requirements for signature requirements in countries where e-signatures are not yet valid. And Doug, I was wondering if you could get your opinion on this.
Sure. So, our take generally is that e-signature is fairly ubiquitous around the world, and that I'm not familiar with any specific country that generally precludes electronic signature. I think the challenge that we have is that the laws in a lot of countries start kind of bifurcating kind of when can you use it and when can you not use it. And it gets very nuanced as it gets into very heavily regulated areas as well, or when you're having to engage of the public sector in particular, is where we start seeing kind of a little bit more of the breakdown as to not having as much clarity. So a couple of kind of practice points, I think. One is, I think you start with the presumption that e-signature is able to be used, with, again, a little healthy kind of skepticism as well going into it, just to say, let me at least then validate that presumption. But I think in most instances, commercial transactions, it is fairly ubiquitous. I think then what you do is then go into really comparing notes with your colleagues in that industry to kind of see where there is some headwinds in it, and then really validate, is it actually a regulatory constraint? Is it a legal constraint or a statutory constraint? Or is it just basically a lack of familiarity? And I think some have mentioned, like, the financial service industry. That's actually a very large industry for us that uses electronic signature. But at the same time, there are some holdouts that just are not familiar with it, or have a conservative view, or even just practically, they don't have the technological solutions in place in order to use it. And so I think there is this element of a dialogue that just needs to occur in some of these geos where there is a view of higher kind of headwinds as it relates to adoption. And then I think it's also just giving us visibility into it, is that we're happy to lean in where we can in order to educate through basically articles that we have law firms as well as other legal professionals generate, as well as we generate a lot of content ourselves. It's engaging with the public agency or the industry group directly to actually have conversations and really try an educational campaign. And then the last one, of course, is lobbying, right? It's just getting basically organizations to change the regulations, change the laws where necessary in order to kind of broaden out the use cases. And we're seeing an enormous amount of additional receptiveness, just using Australia as an example, where the federal government as well as the state agencies are really looking at ways to really transform things during this difficult time when people cannot meet in person, as well as seeing that digital transformation actually makes things much more efficient. And I think some stats suggest, I think it's like roughly $25 to $30 per transaction is saved just by using digital transformation types of technologies. So seeing what the return on investment is and really modernizing the infrastructure of a lot of these different countries is another incentive as well.
And it is your expectation, of course, that this upward trend is likely to continue in the coming year.
Oh, sure. And I think the reason is, again, using just notary as a good example, is notarization is often used for very, very sensitive documents. And I think in the past, there's been this hesitation. But as people are starting to use a lot of these online technologies, audiovisual technologies, electronic technologies, they're seeing that the world doesn't come to an end, that basically there isn't an increase in fraud, that there isn't an increase in any of these concerns. So I think it's actually forcing those naysayers to really starting to look at it in a practical standpoint and see that as these test and pilot programs are happening, or as they're actually opening up in different geos around the world, that people are still able to do business. People are still able to preserve basically the integrity of the document and reduce basically fraud by basically using these types of technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. So nothing essentially propagates the use and falsifying the expectation that it might not work, because nothing, it seems to be working just fine. No one seems to be having any issues with it. That's great. There's an interesting question that just come up from the audience, and I'm opening this up to all our panelists. Is the legal tech solution designed to continue innovating, to take advantage of disruptive technologies and new business practices, in your view? It's a bit of a generic question, but I think we might each have something based on our practice to say. If the legal tech solution is designed to continue innovating, to take advantage.
I'm happy to chip in on this one. The disruption. I think maybe a couple of observations. I think the legal tech landscape has matured a lot the last 6-7 years. A nice indicator of that point is the volume of private equity funding that is going to legal tech vendors. I think we are close to 3 billion a year last time I checked, from almost zero 5-6 years ago. So clearly, the money is going where the money is, and I don't see that trend slowing down. What I do expect, though, is a massive consolidation of vendors, because now from the buy side, this is mind-boggling. I think we are talking like 1,500 vendors in legal tech, and not all of them are relevant to the firm, but I've got a tsunami of emails of vendors every day, and it's really confusing. You don't even have the time to procure sensibly when you have such a huge volume of vendors. So I do expect that there will be a lot of consolidation in the coming years. So that's one reflection. And the second reflection on disruption, I don't use the D word very much. I shy away from the D word. And maybe that's because my firm likes solid business, and maybe is not too keen to take undue risk. But I do think there is a lot of mature or maturing technology that is not yet properly deployed, and I think that's where we need to make some steps. Disruption, it depends on the risk appetite of various companies. Our risk appetite is moderate. So, speaking for the firm, I think we would trade very carefully there.
It sounds like for companies with different risk appetite, they might have to wait ever so slightly longer, it sounds like, to have solutions that might help.
I think the D word has been overused. It's almost a bit of a joke. I'm very respectful of the question, but I think there's a lot of good business to be done without using the D word, using technology.
Yeah, and Julian, I agree with that comment in that I think disruption is more of a provocative statement than a reality. And that what we're seeing is that there's an evolution going on now rather than a disruption. And that evolution is that basically attorneys are seeing that basically they're knowledge managers, and that agreements are not just the static document, but rather something that actually you need to continue to evolve and continue to manage on an ongoing basis, as well as digital workflow is helping make basically the end-to-end processes, both in-house as well as at law firms, much more efficient. And so I think that it'll be really interesting to see how things evolve over the next few years. And to Julian's point about the number of vendors, that's actually really exciting. We have an investment fund. We are obviously acquisitive as well, and we obviously innovate internally as well. And so we see that the ecosystem is getting much more robust for those that have kind of a trust brand like Docusign to really continue to innovate, as well as to partner with a variety of other companies to ensure that integrations are equally important here. Is that you're not going to be able to be everything to everyone, but rather you need to look at the overall ecosystem, have a vision of the evolution of where things are going, and then really work with your customers and your ecosystem to really build, kind of cool new solutions as well.
Yeah, to add to your point, Doug, when we do procure technology, we look at market aggregators, and we do see Docusign as one of the market aggregators, so the potential winner coming out of this consolidation, because I don't want to commit the firm to a vendor that might go bust or might just agonize, and then down the road you don't have the sufficient investment in your technology, and you end up having to switch technologies. So that's something we pay a lot of attention to. We again mitigating potential risk of going with the wrong technology and the wrong partners.
Totally, and I think someone even mentioned earlier, asking I think a question about privacy and just data management. I think data governance is one thing that we're going to see in fiscal year 20 or calendar year 22 is going to be a big deal, which is how do you give people assurances that as you're managing their super sensitive agreements, the super sensitive act of actually signing things, the super sensitive of just actually providing and elevating important information from all your information, how do you protect that? And having someone that is very robust and refined on how they manage their data, I think is normally important. And that I think the startups might have very cool technology, but do you want to rely upon a 30, 50 person company to rely upon to suck in all of your information, mine the information, and then potentially not know what you're going to do with it as well? And so I think the trust brand is also enormously important there too.
Well, I think listening to you, it sounds like the industry has passed a certain threshold of investment in vendors and activity and research that we're quite confident in seeing those trends continue upward into 2022. There's a few questions on the chat that might be related to this, and we might be able to help dispel some of the reluctance around some of the adoption of these technologies. Doug, there was a question for you. Our company is reluctant to engage US suppliers due to privacy reasons. How does Docusign deal with privacy concerns of EU customers?
Yeah, that's, I think, an easy question to answer. I mean, you have to engage sophisticated companies that actually do the right thing. I mean, for example, we have binding corporate resolutions that are publicly available on our site that actually set out our governance structure. There should be, simple questions as to, where do you store your information? How do you manage your data governance program? And there should just be very clear explanations from the companies when you're engaging. And you also want to engage mature companies that actually have a global footprint, that actually do view how do you actually address, not just the privacy concerns in the EU, but around the world, and how do you track those types of obligations? So I think it's important to really see the sophistication of the company by asking them, things like, do you have binding corporate resolutions? I mean, it's a pretty straightforward process, and it's a long-term commitment. And if a company doesn't have BCRs, then you may want to question whether or not they're truly committed to being very transparent regarding their privacy program.
Right. Thanks very much, Doug.
Sure.
As we bring this to a close, there's one question on expectations for the next year, and I would like to address each and every one of you with this. What do you expect, in your opinion, is the biggest technological change? I'm aware that we've touched on it already, but maybe we can highlight one specific bit. What is the biggest technological change anticipated in the next 12 months in the legal function of each of your respective organizations? Doug, would you like to take the lead on this one? Put you on the spot.
Oh, yeah, sure. And I'd be curious to hear everyone else as well, is that what we're seeing both in our organization as well as with all the different colleagues that we engage with is I think it's digital workflow. And I think it's this element of basically really adopting processes that are actually scalable and basically efficient, and really showing the value to your business stakeholders as it relates to kind of using these technologies, not just for the sake of it, but actually to improve speed to market, as well as kind of providing additional value above and beyond what you would otherwise be able to provide.
Doug, I was wondering if we could get another perspective on some of the biggest technological changes anticipated. As we mentioned, no one has a crystal ball, but
well, I like to mention low code, no code. It was a bit of an unexpected. Nobody really saw this market coming so fast. I was personally a bit skeptical when I was first briefed on it, and I must say it's growing on me. So I think it's well, ask me again in a year from now, but I think it's potentially extremely interesting to manage the compromise between off the shelf and then purely bespoke, especially with the idea in mind of creating a branded experience for clients, a branded digital experience for clients, and also in the context of what Doug was saying, digital workflow, absolutely branded if possible. And I see low code, no code as a way to get like a very sleek digital workflow that we can brand and in a way that supports the effectiveness and the differentiation of the firm in the marketplace. But ask me again in a year, Chris.
Sure. Hopefully we'll still be here exchanging views that have not been falsified. I was wondering if I could get the perspective of General Counsel as well on expectations for the new year.
Yeah, I can comment, Chris. I think that, as Doug mentioned, I think that we could improve it even more, the digital workflow in the legal department. And so we started also to have the legal analysis inside of the contract system. So not only the final check from legal department to formalize and to sign the document, but also the legal analysis. So at this moment, we could go out a little bit of the emails, and also we have the benefits that to have the records of the legal analysis for the legal team. And so it's also good for compliance perspective and to have the risk register, and we can use that for other analysis as well. So I think, again, it could increase efficiency if you could change the mind of the company and change the legal department to become more digital as we can. Yeah, let's try to do it.
Yeah, so raising awareness in general, communicating better, just being at the forefront of the conversation really can alert people to the possibility. Thank you very much, Christiane.
Maybe adding on that general idea that Christiane brought in, what I see and what's kind of interesting to observe over time, and that's kind of I'm with Julian to kind of maybe be next year and 2 years from now, we see more clear trends on this one. On the one hand, if you look at the legal world, we have a constant trend that the regulatory density and the regulatory complexity is growing everywhere. So we kind of, politicians and regulatory bodies all over the world keep coming up with beautiful ideas. Look at GDPR, look at these AI regulations that are upcoming. So everybody's kind of trying to add another piece of making the puzzle more complex. And so as an in-house legal department, as a general counsel, you're kind of confronted with the reality that you have only limited resources in terms of money, in terms of team, and the regulatory density is ever increasing. So it's a sheer necessity to kind of look into tools that help you master those tasks. And so what I'm hoping for is that kind of the technological progress is outpacing the increase of regulatory complexity. But so far it's kind of, well, I think regulatory complexity has a bit of a head start. The technological advance is now gaining momentum. So I'm confident to see that this race may turn out in the right direction, but that's going to be interesting to see, because otherwise with the complexity growing and the management not being prepared to devote significantly more resources into legal. I mean, let's face it, kind of nobody's kind of, if you go around and tell, well, the world has become so complex, I need to double my headcount in the legal team, and I also need to kind of get a double budget. Otherwise, they will tell you, look, nice idea, but no. And so technology is helping us, and I'm optimistic that it will help us to keep up with the task, which is ever increasing and ever getting more complex.
Maybe I can add something to that. That's, I mean, we're all aware of technology, how it will increase, how it will become more important. But I notice also quite often that, especially from the legal department, the people, myself and the people who are working in the different legal departments we have, they are not really used to working with technology or sufficiently to work with technology, and with a lot of training that should be done. And that's also for myself. So all these different tools, they exist. I mean, e-signatures, it's a good example. I mean, we have it for maybe a decade, but when did it really started kicking in? That was the moment we needed it, which was the COVID the lockdown. So there we were forced to use it, and then you saw, I mean, it took a couple of weeks and everybody was using it and it was fine and everybody was happy. But there's so many other tools we already have today, which we don't use because we are not used to it, and it's still a little bit more practical to do it. So one of my New Year's resolutions is to spend more time myself on technology, but on the broad spectrum on everything that's technology, and also force my people to spend more time in order to use what's already there. So that's basically the advice and the tip I could give for the audience.
Thank you very much, Johan. Yeah, very interesting points, especially about balancing the need between legislative framework and technological pace, so that we don't inadvertently end up restricting ourselves as society by having archaic frameworks around the technology that already exists, and vice versa, that technology doesn't just run away on its own without any legislative frameworks around it. So I believe we have answered most of the questions from our audience at this point. And if we have any concluding remarks, I would be welcoming those at this point. If not, I would just like to say thank you so much to everyone for the participation. These webinars are always so much more rewarding when the audience engages with us like they did today. So thank you very much for that. And we really do appreciate it. So we're very happy to be hosting this. And the real value in this webinars is that by bringing experts together from multiple fields, we can get at ideas and solutions that might not have been able to get to otherwise. So unless there's any concluding remarks, I think this might be an excellent place at which to leave it. If any of the panelists have anything to add, if not, I would just like to remind the audience that the recording of this webinar will still be available on our website, so you'll be able to access it in approximately a couple of days' time. And we're also very happy to circulate the slides that Doug very kindly presented at the very beginning. Those are very informative and very good guide for the topics that we visited today. And with this, I think this might be an excellent place to leave it. So thank you all very much for your expertise. We very much appreciate hearing your opinions and learning from you. Thank you all very much.